Hello everyone and welcome to the live Q&A with me, Professor Michael Scott. It is Thursday the 4th of October. I hope you've been having a good week so far. For me, it's been the first week of term back at Warwick University, so getting to know all our new students and also for me coming back to the university after a year of research leave as the Leave Hume Research Fellow, so it's actually a chance to meet again some of the students that I knew previously and also to see all the fresh faces coming in, starting their degrees with us in classics of one form or another. So it's been an incredibly fun week. We've already got going with a number of different lecture courses that I'm taking, and I'm looking forward to continuing with those in the week to come. Hey Susie, how are you? Thanks very much for joining this live Q&A today, where we will be, as ever, answering, I hope, at least some of the fantastic questions that you've been sending in. Don't worry, we keep all the questions from each week that I haven't managed to get round to, so I'm going to be taking some from each of those sections across this half hour. Hi Miriam, hi Richard, lovely to see you. Thank you so much all for tuning in. And also this week is a prize week, so we will be towards the end of the half hour announcing a prize, a book giveaway for the best question that we've had over the last couple of weeks, so stay tuned for that. But we kick off today with Nicola Jane Coonan, who sent in a question this week saying, I'm in my final year of a BA Honours Classics degree with the Open University. Great stuff. Finishing with the Romans and the Roman Empire. Hi Julia, how are you doing? Who is your favourite Roman emperor and why? Good question. Okay, who's my favourite Roman emperor and why? Well, obviously you guys as well need to be letting me know who your favourite Roman emperor is if you have a favourite, and kind of we can chat about the advantages and disadvantages of the different Roman emperors. They certainly had quite a few often well publicised disadvantages, and not so many of them get a good clean record. Now, if you ask this of many people, they might well go for Augustus as the first emperor, the man who managed to tread this incredibly fine line between being a ruler and a very strong and strict ruler, but also always appearing to be not the leader, not the single ruler, but just, as he called himself, primus inter pares, the first among equals. And he was very, very cautious to never use the language of the sole ruler. Don't forget, Rome, when it emerged from a republic into an empire, had become a republic because it had decided to expel its king and had sworn never again to return to kingship. So the introduction of empire and emperors back into the Roman world was a very touchy subject that Augustus had to navigate very delicately, and which he did very, very successfully. But he's not my favourite. My favourite, I have to say, of all the Roman emperors is dial forward to the 2nd century AD, and that is the Emperor Hadrian. Now, the Emperor Hadrian, not just because he had a sort of awesome beard in most of his portraits, but because he's the emperor who takes a very, very strong interest in Greece and in the roots of Greek culture and Greek literature and Greek history, and spends an awful lot of time actually travelling around his empire. I mean, one of the reasons we have Hadrian's Wall in England is because this was something that was built to coincide with his visit as he toured his empire and the realms of his empire. Hi Susie, you've just finished that OU module. Great. Okay. Hi Scott, how are you doing? Welcome to this live Q&A with me, Michael Scott. And Stefania, ciao, come va? Tutto bene, spero. So Hadrian was a man who took to the road, as it were. He didn't just sit in Rome and rule from there. He did a tour of the very fringes, the very borders of his empire, which took him all the way through from England, through North Africa, through into what is now the Middle East, and then up into Northern Europe. And Greece for him was an incredibly important place because he saw kind of Greece as a font of a great deal of cultural capital and heritage. And Hadrian got involved in a lot of building projects in Greece, some of which we explored in the recent Ancient Invisible Cities. Hi Alex, how are you doing? We went down into that Hadrianic Aqueduct, 60 metres underground, as he saw the need for the city to be given sort of new, better water supplies for it to be able to sustain itself in the 2nd century AD. And it wasn't just that aqueduct. He also built big cisterns and reservoirs. And within the city of Athens itself, he also built an enormous library, Hadrian's library there, that later, a couple of centuries later, would have one of the first Christian churches built inside it as well. And he also repaired, or rather finished off, a number of buildings in Athens. So one of the most famous is the great Olympian temple of Zeus in Athens. It's absolutely enormous, down to the west side, I think, of the Acropolis. Linda, Elagabalus, you go for. That's a tough choice to defend, I think. Certainly he gets top marks for kind of not really caring what other people think of him, or seeming to at least, and going all out. Marcus Aurelius is another big favourite of mine, and he got himself into a lot of trouble though once. I was reading recently that he chose to sell all of his wife's gold and silk clothes to help pay for one of his wars. I wonder how that conversation went down when he got home that night. But the finish off with Hadrian, he had the Temple of Olympian Zeus that had actually been started by the Greek tyrant Pisistratus back in the 6th century BC. Hi Barbara, you're in Florence. Great to hear where you're from. Yes, let me know where you're listening from. I hope we've got a suitably international audience as always. For the live Q&A with me, Professor Michael Scott. So he finished off the Temple of Zeus. Hadrian finished off the Olympian Temple of Zeus in Athens that had been started by the Greek tyrant Pisistratus back in the 6th century BCE, and which no Greek community, individual or community like the democracy, had really been able to finish because it was just so huge, so enormous, such a giant kind of idea. And it was Hadrian who eventually came along and finished it off and left it standing as one of the great wonders of the Greek world. Okay, hi, how are you doing? Good to see you. Kind of a Warwick student has joined us, or an ex-Warwick student moved off into bigger and better things around the world. It's good to see you come back. We miss you from the democracy and imperialism classes. So that's my answer to Nicola's question, but please send in your suggestions of who you think your favourite Roman emperor is. It'd be good to see whether we get any votes for any kind of completely. Anyone want to go for Nero? Anyone want to defend him as the best emperor of the lot? So what we're going to do is we're going to take another question now, and then we will start to do something, our two sections where we do classics in the news, and then what's going on around the world to do with the ancient world. So those two sections coming up, and don't forget also we've got the prize giving coming up for the best question we've had over the last couple of weeks towards the end. If you want to know more about my work and the sort of stuff I get up to, then it's all there on the website of www.michaelscottweb.com, and you can also see my blog there. And you can also follow me on Twitter, ProfMCScott, and on Instagram as well. I'll be tweeting photos that come to mind as I go on my travels. And I'm at ProfMCScott on Instagram as well. Tweeted a photo the other day which kind of amused me hugely, and a lot of you as well. Hi Sheila, how are you doing? Thank you very much for joining. Amused a lot of you where it was some pretty bad translations of an Italian menu from a restaurant where penne arrabbiata, as many of you all know, sort of kind of arrabbiato is the Italian for sort of angry, was translated simply as pens to anger, which I think was a particular favourite. And then the one above, spaghetti alle vongole, spaghetti with clams, was translated as genuine clam spaghetti, which we left us all wondering what fake clam spaghetti might look like or sound like, or even be what it might be called in Italian. If you've got any insights, please let us know, but do follow me on Instagram as well if you can. So we move now to another question. This guy is from Tracy Baker. What is your view on fiction as a means of getting people into ancient history? I absolutely think that kind of the fiction is a brilliant way into any period of study, and particularly ancient history. Hi Barbara, you're Mexican but living in Florence. Wow, okay. Can you do a live video sometime about Alexander the Great? Yes, of course. Send in your question in advance, and we will kind of do a little bit about Alexander the Great. He's come up once or twice before in some of the previous live Q&As that I've done, and then you can watch those either on the Facebook website, but we're also uploading them to YouTube as well. So if you go to YouTube, you can find my channel on YouTube, and then all the live Q&As are registered there. And we've also moved them over this week to be part of the resources for schools as part of the Warwick Classics Network, which is the outreach and widening participation project that I run based at Warwick University and in the Warwick Classics department, where we speak out to and help support the teaching of classics, classical civilization and ancient history in schools around the country. So if you want to get a hold of some of the previous live Q&As, please do so through www.warwick.ac.uk/WCN, or through my YouTube channel or through the Facebook page. And also, I should announce today, I forgot to tell you this, that as of today or yesterday, the DVD of Ancient Invisible Cities, Cairo, Istanbul and Athens is now available via Amazon. You can purchase that and they'll be sending it to you in double quick time. Okay, what would the Romans have made of all this social media? I think the Romans, and certainly some Romans, would have loved it. I mean, can you imagine what Cicero would have done with social media? He'd have been absolutely on it, and utilising it as another tool through which he could communicate his message to the people. And don't forget, for the Romans, obviously to get things done, you needed to have the ear of and be kind of well thought of by the senior aristocratic members of the Senate. But there did come times and moments when what you needed to do was appeal to the wider mass of the people, and it was quite a brutal scene of Roman politics in speaking to the masses of the people when they all came to vote. It was there was no kind of respected quiet listening. It was very, very vocal indeed. So I suspect the Romans would have really got stuck in pretty well with social media in many forms. Yeah, absolutely, Sheila. What about the plebs too? Kind of very, very important in terms of kind of convincing them. Although don't forget, in the Roman, at least in the time of the Roman Republic, when there were votes and elections going on in this similar, that had real kind of impact on the direction of the city. Don't forget that the Roman voting system was set up to give an inbuilt advantage towards the high classes of society. So the high classes of society were always the groups who voted first. And if they were all aligned on an issue, then frankly the much larger group of plebs, which were actually only then represented in small voting blocks, they could never swing an issue in a different direction. So Roman votes, very often, if the higher classes of society were aligned, it really didn't matter what the lowest groups of society voted. Anyway, we come back to Tracy Baker's view. What is your view on fiction as a means of getting people involved in ancient history? As I said, I think this is great. I mean, I loved the Percy Jackson books, even as an adult. And obviously Harry Potter as well, with all its classical allusions, thanks to J.K. Rowling having done her classics degree at Exeter University when she was younger, but they were accompanying me all the way through my studies. One of the things that always, from the Percy Jackson books, that always kind of stands out for me, and that was then it was replicated in the film that they made, Percy Jackson and the Lightning Thief, was a brilliant kind of marriage between ancient and modern, where when they were searching for Medusa and trying to battle Medusa in order to be able to see where she was without looking at her, because of course if you looked at her you got turned to stone, they used the shiny back of an iPod to be able to see it. So it was a beautiful kind of connection of the two. Caroline Lawrence's Roman Mystery Series, absolutely, another absolutely fantastic way in to the Lost Books, to the Odyssey. She's absolutely kind of, these are all really important books because what they do is they inspire people to want to find out and learn more, and they're great and entertaining reads as well. And I think they're carrying on in the best traditions of what the ancients themselves did. I mean, don't forget the ancients, and particularly the ancient Greeks, were great storytellers. Mythos, our word myth. Mythos, if you translate it from the ancient Greek, is stories. And what the Greeks did was they were surrounded by, and they sort of got almost cultural understanding of their world through the stories that they told and retold. And the great thing about ancient myth telling is that every telling is a retelling, is a representation. The myth changes, it's constantly in emotion. And you can see that coming all the way through to the present day with Stephen Fry's books, where he's done his Mythos book, and he's just about to do another one that's coming out about heroes, Greek heroes. So in that sense, I think kind of storytelling, fictional and non-fictional, are in the best traditions of what the ancients themselves were up to. So I think get into it as much as possible. Here we go. We've got a question coming up about Alexander the Great here now. Connor Hickey. A lot of historians have been revisiting the idea of whether Alexander the Great was really great and prefer to see Philip as the architect of the Macedonian Empire. What is your opinion on this debate? Well, thanks, Connor, for that very much. Yes, it's one of these issues that actually, if you look back at the historiography of the study of Macedon and of Alexander the Great and of Philip, keeps coming up on a sort of fairly regular basis as we tip backwards and forwards between sort of being in love with the Alexander the Great character and wanting to attribute all his amazing successes to him alone, and then actually backing back from that and saying, well, it's not just about an individual changing things, it's about the processes and institutions that were put in place for him to be able to succeed so well. And it is undeniable that when Philip of Macedon came to the throne, Alexander the Great's father, he undertook and forced through a huge number of really important changes, particularly in the way Macedonian society was governed and its army was trained. Effectively, he created a standing, trained army with those famous Sarissa long spear weapons, which then was a brilliant tool, a very, very kind of sharpened tool that Alexander the Great could then use to devastating effect, and Philip did too, indeed, on the battlefield. So a number of the problems that had plagued Macedonian rulers for so long, throughout the 5th century, Macedonian rulers were plagued by dynastic turmoil, infighting, the disparate nature of the Macedonian kingdom, the lack of any kind of coordinated bureaucracy and fighting force. A lot of those problems were kind of, if you like, solved by Philip of Macedon, which then meant that Alexander the Great could then utilise the tools that had been put at his disposal, and that's without taking away anything from his own political acumen, his own military skill, and his own sense of daring and possibility to be able to take on the world. Question coming in from Roger, but I've always been curious about why do the noses of old sculptures on ancient sites. Oh, I can't see the rest of your question. Hasn't come up. Talking about the noses, they're all fallen off. One of the things that so often happens is the noses, because they're projecting out from the face, gets scrubbed off when the statue gets buried in the ground or gets reused for something else. But if I haven't quite got your question, I'll come back to it and answer it in another week. And see how we go from there. So let's take a break from answering questions now and just have a look at what's in the news. Well, I think one of the really interesting things that I've been fascinated by, one of my loves, particularly about the ancient Greek world, is looking at ancient Greek religion and ancient Greek sanctuaries. And many of you, some of you, I hope, have had the chance to visit up on Samothrace, the sanctuary of the great gods on Samothrace, which was a mystery cult sanctuary. Now, this place has been known about for a long time, and there was a lot of early excavation work done, but it hasn't been actively excavated for quite some time. But this year they have reopened the excavations, being led conjunction between a Greek team and an American team, which is absolutely fascinating, and they are using some of the same kind of cutting edge technology that we were using in ancient invisible cities to be able to digitally reconstruct what this very curious, very odd sanctuary was like. So you can have a look, if you Google a sort of Sanctuary of the Great Gods on Samothrace, and you look at some of the stuff that's being put out there by the American university leading the dig, it really gives you an amazing sense of what it must have been like to be there. Sam, which emperor would you like to meet and why? Well, we started with that question about who's my favourite emperor. Excuse me. Oh dear. Kind of was talking about the great gods on Samothrace. It's a sign from the gods. And the ancient Greek world, if someone sneezed, it could be taken as a sign that the gods were particularly in a favour of a plan that had just been spoken about. Sam, which emperor would you like to meet and why? Yes, I would like to meet the Emperor Hadrian. I would like to have dinner with him one night in Athens and talk about some of the things that he had discovered and understood about his empire when he went not just to Athens but on that major tour around the whole of his empire. Thank you, Denise, bless you, that's very kind. as he went on his major tour around the empire. What was he thinking as he saw the very limits of the Roman world? We have an earlier story from a Roman emperor, that of Trajan, that he, in his big expansion of the Roman Empire west, as he sort of moved into what is now the Middle East, he stood on the shores of the Persian Gulf, having conquered all the way down there and beaten back the Parthian Empire. He stood on the shores of the Persian Gulf and he saw the great fleet of Roman trading ships setting off on their way to India with the monsoon winds for trade as part of the ancient global Silk Roads. And we are told by the historians that he stood there and wished he was a younger man, that he could get on board and go with them. Hello Tan, how are you doing? Great. Anthony, what's my opinion about Christian church architecture? Is there a specific kind of thing that you're interested about Christian churches? Let us know, ask a question. You can do it, if not now live, then via the Facebook page, and we'll answer it next week. I think one of the really interesting things about the emergence of Christianity in the Roman world through to from the 4th century AD onwards is how very much ancient Greek and Roman sanctuaries don't sort of entirely pack up and stop overnight, with the assumption even when there is an official kind of changeover of the official religion of the Roman world to Christianity under the Emperor Theodosius in the 380s. But in actually these, sometimes they reutilize what had been a pagan temple as a Christian church, and sometimes, such as at Delphi for instance, they build another Christian basilica sort of basically next door to the pagan temple, but keep the pagan temple there. So there's this very curious backwards and forwarding, or kind of side-by-side nature of religions. And the other thing I absolutely love about the early history of Christianity in the Roman world is, where do you think the phrase, when in Rome, do as the Romans do, comes from? It's actually from early Christians within the Roman Empire trying to get their head around, hi Susan, how you doing? Trying to get their head around very varied early Christian worship. So a Christian living in Carthage in North Africa went to Rome and was extremely confused by the fact that Roman Christians seemed to do Christianity and the worship of Christ and God in a very different way to that which he was used to back in Carthage. And so he went back to his bishop, his Christian bishop in Carthage, and he asked, well, in Rome they do all this differently, so what should I do? What is the right way to worship? And the Christian bishop replied, when in Rome, do as the Romans do. So there you go, that's where the expression comes from. Delia, you're listening from Northwest London. You graduated 20 years ago. Oh, but it doesn't seem a day, and great that you're still so interested in ancient history and archaeology. Anyway, so we must finish off with what classics are in the news. So the Sanctuary of the Gods on Samothrace, absolutely, that's the place to go if you're next heading to Greece very, very soon. Also, it's great news that the Heritage Lottery funding, £2 million worth of Heritage Lottery funding, has been won to help support and protect Hadrian's Wall and the Antonine Wall, much less known about but equally interesting, when at one point the Romans did push beyond Hadrian's Wall and established a wall further north up into Scotland. Less of it survives, it's not quite as dramatic as Hadrian's Wall, but an equally important survivor of the sort of, if you like, the furthest push north that the Romans accomplished. But there's £2 million of Heritage Lottery funding that's going towards the supporting the great work that's done up at Hadrian and Antonine's Wall, so that's fantastic. And in the A66 roadworks in Cumbria, kind of what comes out of a good piece of roadworks, we have a new Roman grave uncovered. So again, all the links to these will be on the Facebook page, and you can catch up and explore a little bit. And then what's on? Okay, so here's something I was just talking, this Saturday, in fact, in a couple of days' time, I'm going to be heading up to Warwick because we have our Warwick Classics undergraduate open days. So if you know anyone who's thinking about studying classics at university level, or indeed if you would like to come on as a mature student and study classics with us, we're very, very, very keen to have you. Please do come along to one of our open days. We'll be there this Saturday, the 6th of October, and also on Saturday, the 20th of October. You can sign up, come up, meet us all, hear a little bit about the department, hear some taster lectures. I'll be there giving a lecture, and we can also have a chance to chat and hopefully encourage you to put in an application. So do come along and see us. Then there is the exciting news. This was just released by Greg Jenner, who's the historical consultant to Horrible Histories, that he is currently in Bulgaria because they are making Horrible Histories the movie. Not just the short TV series, but Horrible Histories the movie, which is going to start with, it is going to be about The Rotten Romans, yes! So Horrible Histories, the movie, is going to start with the Romans in the ancient world. Of course, I would have loved it to have been the Groovy Greeks. Horrible Histories, the Groovy Greeks is one of my all-time favourite books, and I often use it, quote and do the quizzes from it in lectures with my students. But the Rotten Romans isn't too bad, and that will be coming out in, I think it's July next year, 2019. So they're filming right now. It's just been released that they're making this movie. It's been a big secret up to now, and we can all look forward to that next July. So thank you very much indeed for joining me in that. And yes, lots of love coming out for Horrible Histories. Miriam, Donna, excellent news, great stuff. We've got time for one or two more questions. So where are we? If you could ask, this is from Stephen Rafter. If you could ask a question of the Temple of Apollo at Delphi, what would it be? Well, Delphi is a place very, very special to my heart. I did my PhD work on Delphi and spent some time living in the French archaeological dig house, actually, at the site, which is a very odd place to stay overnight because, as you may know from having visited Delphi, the modern town of Delphi is round the next corner of the mountains. So in the cleft of the mountain where Delphi is at night, when all the tourists have gone home and the museum is shut, the only people staying there are those in the French archaeological dig house. So you have the site of Delphi as your sole companion, and it gets quite spooky there as the moonlight glints over the columns of the Temple of Apollo. But the question from Stephen was, if you could ask a question of the Temple of Apollo and of the Pythian priestess who supposedly took the question and then received inspiration from the god Apollo to be able to answer you, what would that question be? Now I have to sort of perhaps burst a few bubbles here when I say that we should never think about the oracle at Delphi, the Pythian priestess, as a sort of equivalent of Mystic Meg, or of any kind of fortune telling that we might be used to in the modern world. You never went to the Pythian priestess and said, "Tell me my future," or "Read my palm," or anything like that. Anything as straightforward as that, as open as that. In fact, the Temple of Apollo at Delphi and the oracular personnel demanded that you asked your question in a very specific format. You had to ask your question, would it be better and more profitable for me to do X or Y? You had to offer it that question as with two alternatives, and then your answer was, you got an answer back, which was to do X or to do Y. Now, one of the things that did very cunningly was sort of give the Temple of Apollo at Delphi and the oracular personnel a sort of inbuilt Teflon coating to ever being found out to be categorically wrong. Because if you got told to do X and you went away and did X and it turned out to be a disaster, well, then you came back and they went, you go, well, you told me to do X and it was a disaster, and simply they would say, yes, but you have no idea how bad Y would have been. At the moment it's a dual choice, X or Y. You could never prove categorically that the other course of action would have been better for you. But it also speaks to what the role of the Temple of Apollo at Delphi and the oracle really was. It wasn't so much fortune telling. I think we should think about it as what is being called a sense-making mechanism, a way out of dialogue that had become stuck and confused. And so very often it was most effective when communities were discussing amongst themselves what they should do in a particular situation, and they had reached a blockage. They couldn't decide amongst themselves. There was roughly equal numbers for either option, and so they were stuck. And in those instances, going to someone like the Apollo oracle at Delphi and being able to say, look, should we do X or Y, and being given a suggestion coming from the gods to do X, allowed for that community blockage to be passed and for the community to go, okay, well, this is what the gods have said, so let's all get behind that and go on. So it really was a way of getting through community dispute as much as anything that came with the ultimate authority of the gods. So sadly not quite your Mystic Meg, but nevertheless an incredibly important institution within the ancient Greek world. Miriam, Brexit. yes, absolutely. Brexit would be the question to ask, exactly the best possible kind of question, we could to ask the Oracle of Delphi. In fact, we could just go and have taken the referendum. Would it be better for us to do X or Y, to leave or to stay? We could take that to the Temple of Apollo at Delphi, and if we believed all still in the ancient Olympian gods, we would have got an answer, and we would have happily continued on our way without the political fallout, perhaps, that has happened in the same way as it has today. So, brilliant idea. In fact, one person once said to me when they were hearing about the Oracle of Delphi, they said, "Oh, that really does sound quite a lot like a management consultant. You paid them quite a lot of money, and you had to pay to consult the Oracle in the ancient world as well. And then they told you, backed you kind of an idea that you'd been chewing over and thinking about, and told you kind of what to do and sent you on your merry way. I'm going to have to send you all on your merry way, and I'm going to have to head off on my merry way as well, as our time has got to come to an end already. But it's not. We must do the prize giving. Absolutely, the best question over the last couple of weeks. Now, I've been reviewing the questions that have come in. And for me, the best question we've had is from Angela Ryder, who asked that there were many texts from ancient Greece and Rome that we know were written, but either do not exist for us to read or are fragmentary, and if you could choose one to be discovered in its entirety, what would it be? That's my favourite question the last couple of weeks, and I was a bit greedy, and I went for all the lost individual constitutional studies by Aristotle and his school, for all the different city communities across ancient Greece. So congratulations, Angela. If you get in touch through the Facebook page and send us a message, if you're listening, then we will get a copy of my book Ancient World signed and out to you. Let us know what you'd like in the dedication, and keep those questions coming in. It's absolutely fantastic to have this opportunity to talk with you and answer some of your questions, and I look forward to seeing you next Thursday, the 11th of October, 4 p.m. I'll be here. I hope you can too. Thank you very much indeed for joining, and have a great rest of your week.